Hey, welcome back to the channel. My name is Numa Chung. If you are new to this channel, and I'm a powerlifting coach from the UK. If you missed the previous video to the series, make sure you click the link here or here, wherever it is. But today we're going to go through the full setup for the bench press, and we're going to go through everything that you need to know about executing the bench press with the one and only JJ.
Yeah, sizing the bench press. When we talk about like coaching the bench press, a lot of people I typically see, I don't really see that they size their bench press right, especially if they're training in like commercial gyms or if they're training in like a different setup from like the competition setup itself. So obviously over here in this gym we have the Lego, so that's great because it's like the most comp spec, like it's literally the same one as any international competition or anything like that. So the first thing that I would like you to do is obviously I think you know your rack height, but like just to show people, if you sit down on the bench or if you lie down on the bench, one of the things is you would want to essentially just extend your hands, right, and then just kind of like depress it a little bit, right? So if you depress and extend your hands, right, you can see that this is a little bit too high. So what I would say is obviously, so normally you are rack height like
Between 12 and 13.
very high. yeah, essentially. So let's just put it to 13 first. So I see both extremes. I see people I see the extreme of people using too high a rack height a little bit more commonly than people who use too low a rack height. And the reason for that is because I think people think that they need to do less work out of the rack if they use a super high one. But the reason I don't like that is because it actually compromises the shoulder depression that you can get set up. So how I typically coach it is when we talk about like bench press and setup, I like my lifters to get their shoulders as close to the lip as possible. Yes. So if you kind of set up like that, what a lot of people will do is that because they get taught to set up with so if you go lower a bit, they get taught like set up with the bar over your eyes. So that's over your eyes, right? Yeah. So can you see how much like shoulder elevation you have now? And you almost have to like reach overhead.
Yeah.
So if you sit back up, just sit like that, and you just kind of like raise your shoulders like this, right? So if you drop it to sub 90, right? So this is a depressed position, right? So maintaining your depression, just try to go overhead without raising your shoulders, right? So this is about like the point in which you can raise your arm before your shoulders start to elevate, right? So if you would just go like higher, like go to like 110, can you see how much the shoulders are like shrugged up now? So if you're lying down and you need to get the bar out of the bench, but you are like from here, and after you unrack, you have like 100 kilos, 150, so on and so forth, and you're trying to recreate that depression, like it's already a losing battle because you have like hundreds of kilos in your hand, and the bar is gonna force you into whatever preset position that you have before. So I don't like the bar over the eyes kind of like setup. My spacing is actually way closer. I tell my lifters like literally set the bar up over your collarbones, right? And why I say collarbones is because most people can reach, like if there was a bar here, they can reach up to their collarbones and not lose their depression. And it doesn't matter because a lot of people will say, oh, like it's so low down, blah, blah, blah. It's like at the end of the day, when you take out the bar, it's over your sternum. So like between your collarbone and your sternum, you have like so much, like you have like essentially like what, 15 cm of range. And then if you're a bigger person, that might be even more. Like if you're telling me that with 15 cm of range, you can still hit the lip, then like, I don't know how to help you. I guess like just don't press back so much. Yeah. So this time let's try you set up, right, and get that bar over almost like your collarbone or over your neck, right? So you can see that this time you are way closer. And the most important thing is if you look at the side, like if you took like a straight side-on view, your shoulders have cleared the lip of this rack, right? So if it's like way higher, then as you press back to the start position, you will hit the rack because your start position is inside the lip, if that makes sense. Okay, so from here, what I really like about your pre-setup is already you have a little bit of elbow bend, and that is how I typically coach it as well. So I want you to set up with your depression as much as you can. So think about like if you set up a little bit lower, right? Okay, and I want you to relax this part. So like just drop flatten your back on the bench, flatten your hips and stuff. From here, you are going to then use your quads, pushing through your entire foot to hip thrust high. Yep, and then just kind of like roll yourself under. Yeah, there we go. Perfect. Right? Okay, so you can see that the shoulders are away now. And from this position, how you're going to unrack is literally just like extend your triceps hard. Yep, and that's it. And then just pull it out towards the sternum. And there you have so much clearance from the rack. And then that's it. And then just put your hips down really slowly while maintaining your quad. Right? So then that's the position that we want from here. And then that's how I would kind of like set up and get the bar out of the rack to begin. Yeah, so reducing a lot of, you can just re-rack. So we're reducing as much of the needless movement, like back and forth or things like that. So again, just to recap, collarbones, and then like lock the arms hard, and you should get it over your sternum itself. Any questions about that?
So what do I need to be thinking about with regards to where my eyes should be, where the back of my neck should be, all about those things when during the unrack? Does that matter?
Okay, so I think we'll talk about the, for me, I think talk about the back of the neck, because a lot of people, when they set up, they think back of the neck a lot. I personally have been cueing that less nowadays. I think I cue back of the head instead. Because one of the reasons why I don't like to cue the back of the neck is if you look from the side and people cue like a flattening the neck, they can do it two ways. So they can do it via chin tuck, right? So yes, your neck gets flat, right? But the problem with that is if you have your shoulders like that and you chin tuck, you can actually roll everything downwards, and then as you touch, it goes into this like really funky like down bottom position. So the other thing I like to cue is like a head or like a neck retraction. So it's not this, it's this. So it's think about like pushing your chin like backward.
Bench.
Yeah, like into the bench, not tucking your neck itself. So that's one of the things that I cue as well. Another thing with the bench press setup is, remember I said I want you to kind of like hip thrust a little bit. That for me is like a really key component to the way I coach a bench press. Not because you should be using your glutes or anything. In fact, you want your glutes as relaxed as possible during this setup. But one of the reasons why I do that is because if you set up itself, so if you set up for me,
Where's it my?
we can talk about that in a bit. But like you just set up whatever is comfortable for you now. So if Miguel come towards the side a little bit. So one of the positions that I like in the setup is that I want to be seeing that the hips, right, are way higher than the shoulders to start.
Okay.
A lot of people think about sliding back. So like if you were to slide yourself back, like yeah, you slide yourself back, and then they complain that, oh, the bench is super slippery, blah blah blah. I need to like my feet are sliding away from it. It's because like the way friction works, if you don't know, is that like friction increases as the normal force increases. Like the force.
To clarify to the viewers at home, what do you mean by?
So normal is the force that is perpendicular to the surface area, right? The force downwards, right? A lot of people will think like, I'm just gonna slide up as hard on it. It's not about the sliding up, right? If you want to increase the amount of like grip you get from bench, regardless of any bench, it's about how much force you put into the bench. And if you think about the bench press itself, you're pushing the bar away from the bench. You're not trying to slide up the bench. It's not a conveyor belt, right? It's pushing two surfaces like in opposite directions from each other. So the key component to creating a lot of downward force is actually coming from the hip thrust itself. So if you like, I always cue like getting your hips higher than your shoulder. So like Like you can see like this is the distance, but if he can get like his hips here, he can get more like downward force into the bench itself, right? So, and then he can slide, right? So you got to maintain that downward force though, because sometimes people, they just slide and they don't think about that. So, do you feel your abs or your hip flexors in this position?
Hip flexors.
Yeah, so it's okay to feel it. Any glutes? Okay, good. Then we're in the correct position, right? So, and then you can really unrack. So just pop, and then come, and then as you lower your feet, try to maintain that that downward force as much as possible. Okay, yeah. Cool. And you can see that. Do you feel like your back of the neck is flat on the bench? Almost, right? But even then, it's not. For me, it's become less and less of like a consideration how flat the lifter's back of the neck is. I mean, in the past when the bench was a little bit softer, then yes, I would want that. But again, like I said, they can reach that flat back, that flat neck position really counterproductively to what we want, which is essentially keeping the shoulders down and then like that downward force in the bench. So yeah, you can flatten your neck, but if you flatten it wrongly, you're gonna get your shoulders rolling into a poor position to start as well. So not exactly a thing that I cue, but I do like them to feel a lot of pressure going through the back of the head. Like almost think about like where that bony prominence of the back of the head is, and you should be able to do that. Cool. Any other questions about that?
When it comes to the unrack, is there anything that you would recommend with the breathing and breathing side of things?
Not really, but I would say that a lot of people experience like kind of like symptoms of like where they like pass out. I would say like don't hold your breath, like or if you need to breathe in, I'd say like take like a 40% inhale. Like don't feel like you need to like max inhale. And the other thing is one of the cues that I really like for that breathing in is breathe in through like a straw. Yeah, rather than trying to like take a gulp, because if you lie down and you just like breathe in freaking hard, like, yeah, can you see how everything kind of like moves? Yeah, like elevates, or like you get like weird shoulder position, or like a lot of people, what they'll do is they do like this, right? They move the neck and they move the spine, and everything moves as well. So it's like you do this like super elaborate 30 seconds, max out your attempt clock kind of setup, only to kill it all by like taking a stupidly big breath. And then when you're holding that breath, like you pass out from winding yourself. So I think a lot of what I feel is helpful is actually kind of like, I feel counterintuitive to what's being said like elsewhere, because people are just like, oh, you know, like tight. It's with the bench press on the setup, I would actually like advise against that. To on the setup component. Yeah, that. Okay, good. Okay, so one of the things that I think that I see with your bench press is that you use quite an internally rotated grip.
Yeah.
And then there are two things that I kind of want to just kind of highlight to people, as they are not things that I believe people bring up pretty frequently. Number one is a lot of people, I think the modern powerlifting talks a lot about free the scap. So people understand, I'm not going to squeeze my lats super hard, or like I'm not going to like retract super hard. Mm-hmm. But one of the things that they don't do as well is they don't actually free the scap in a sense of like getting their shoulder blades off of the bench itself. So I think if you set up again, I'll try to help you adjust your grip to start. Okay, so one of the things with your grip is that you're getting a lot of outside hand pressure, right? right? Okay, but you have, so you see if the way that you're kind of like really flared out like this,
Yeah.
and you're trying to bias that super internally rotated position, is that you actually end up like elevating your shoulders, right? So if you were to just look at your shoulder mechanics in general, this is like a more normal position, and then like this is like a internally rotated position, right? So when you internally rotate your hand quite a bit, right, you get that natural elevation, which is in actually, you know, it's actually the opposite of depression, right? Because your shoulders are elevating. So what I would say is, don't worry too much about the hand first. Like, set your depression, right? Set your depression. Okay, so can you see how your hand is kind of like organizing into that natural, a little bit more natural position? And then just from here, just create a little bit of the IR that you want without raising your shoulders too much. Okay, and then that, yeah, it's quite subtle. It doesn't need to be like this thing, because if you roll it hard in, you naturally get this, and then again, like I said, you're fighting a losing battle.
Is that a mobility issue, or is that a structural issue that is within?
I think that's just like it. It's, I wouldn't say it's like a mobility. I think it's more like a anthropomorphic kind of thing, because it's the way that you're built. Like your internal rotation is gonna ride with your shoulder elevation, no matter how like good your shoulder mobility. At some point, you're gonna roll, right? And the reason why I don't like that is because you might feel very tight when you unrack, but it doesn't matter, because at the bottom position is where you're gonna be in trouble, right? So if one thing I can say is that if you're really struggling to find out what the right grip position or what the right elbow or shoulder position is, I want you to unrack the bar, right? And then just touch your, like come straight down and like rest the bar on your chest, right? So do you feel that at this position, you actually can use, like what muscles do you feel are like the best leverage for?
I can feel a bit of X.
Yeah.
Yeah, most.
Okay, so from here, if you were to like internally rotate a little bit more, what do you feel now? Yeah, front delt, right? And then if you tuck super hard, what do you feel? Yeah, so that's what I think you want to do. So a lot of the times, if you're really struggling to find that what's a good hand position, you want to take reference from the bottom position, right? So if you press it back up, like this should be your hand position. Like if you internally rotate some more, which is what I saw just now, I think, and then you go down, just go straight down, like don't change. Yeah. So that's what people will usually report to me as well. And then it's like, oh, I feel front delt. It's like, yeah, because you're trying to like hack your technique rather than actually like find out what's the best way to, for yourself. So yeah, if you can rack it back, and I typically see that the people that struggle to use an IR grip, the most are people with slightly longer arms, because they need to go through a larger range of shoulder extension, right? So they get to a point where they run out of extension, then they're just gonna dump into that bottom position as well. So I always take reference from the bottom position if there is an extremely new lifter as well. So that's how I would kind of work on the grip and the things itself. Albeit some people they will be able to use like an IR grip, or they will be able to use like a super tuck grip, or like a little bit more tuck grip. But I think don't look at the top, don't look at the grip, look at the bottom position. Yeah.
And in terms of my fingers, like, do you recommend just sort of like holding it in place? Do you recommend a hard squeeze, or what? Or do you recommend with regard to the fingers?
So the thing about fingers and hand is that they can naturally lock up your shoulder quite a bit. So if you're gonna squeeze the bar really hard, you can't maneuver the shoulders. And if you are someone that feels like, hey, I do need that tightness from squeezing, then one of the things I would say is that you have to be very sequential about it. You have to start by setting the shoulders first, so that is the shoulder position you want to lock up. Right, think about your hand as like the final like seal of everything. So the freer you can keep your hand, right, is the more you will get more range to the shoulders. So for some people, they might need to squeeze because they naturally have like much more mobile shoulders. So they need a little bit irradiation or a little bit of a squeeze and feel that tightness. But for most people, I would say the cue for me is like hold, don't squeeze. So like think about it like you're holding a drink in a cup or something like that. You're like, you don't need to like death grip the mug, right, to hold it. Like you just want that because you can still move around as a result of that. And if you were to squeeze, I would say typically I call it the gun grip, right, where it's essentially when if you ever have shot a weapon, your discipline would be to keep the finger off the trigger, right? So I would just keep like the index and the middle finger a little bit more relaxed, right? Rather than trying to like squeeze it really hard. And it's going to be really hard if you use a super IR grip, because like naturally when it's super IR, the pressure will be more inside of the hand, and then these two fingers will naturally like get a little bit more tension as well. So like if you were to keep your do the British tea drinking thing, like that, right? And then just keep it like that, and you try the bench with like that and see how it feels for you.
Oh, it's a nice pressure on my head.
Yep. Right.
Feel the pressure on the outside of my hand.
Right, and then if you were to do the reverse, so keep the index and middle finger a little bit more. Right? See, the minute you try to like change your hand, your grip tightness, you change your hand pressure, you change your hand position as well. And then you try that, see how that feels comparative.
Feels like a longer range of motion.
Yep, for sure. So which one did you feel was like?
I felt stronger. I felt like I could lift more with the first.
With the looser outside hand. Yeah, so then in that case, that might be some position that you might need to bias your own training towards rather than being more outside hand. So again, the way I coach it is that when you get a new lifter, you might not necessarily know like what's the best for them. So have them play around with the differences in pressure, and then you organizing it from the bottom position rather than like, oh, does it feel really good at the top or whatnot. So execution wise, I think a lot of it we covered via the setup. So that there are two big things that I see typically with execution. So if you just unrack itself, execution itself, two things that I see. Norman, can you use the inside hand pressure that you found a little bit better? Yeah. Okay, cool. Okay, so execution wise, three big things I'd like to focus on. The first one that I give to a lot of people is think about clearing the scaps off the bench, right? So what I mean by that is if I were kind of like to go underneath your back over here, right? I can actually touch your shoulder blades. Yeah. So there's your shoulder blades, but there's not a lot of space between your shoulder blades and the bench itself. So like here, I can feel like the back of the shoulder blade is still on the bench. So I would like to get you like to clear it off the bench a little bit more, if you can, right? And as you descend, try to keep that off the bench. Yeah. So at no point should you feel like, hey, the shoulder blade is being like squished against the bench itself. And I think if a lot of more people focused on this aspect of it, they consistently keep their arches a lot higher, and they get, I think it's a bit of a hot take, but like people, you get a lot less shoulder problems because your shoulders can actually move now. Obviously with some weight classes that might not be a possibility, right? So that's why I think if you kind of like think about retraction a little bit and getting the chest up to meet the bar, you create that space. Okay, so I think that takes a little bit of practice though. You won't get it like immediately, which is also why when we do the foam roller extension drill, that is the the position that we want to create as well. Okay, so any questions about that aspect of our execution itself?
With regards to, being able to get that sort of arch, that extension, and freeing the scaps a bit more, is that something that normally, if you are someone who's quite stiff, right, you've not really worked on your arch before, you're someone, or maybe you're just a heavyweight guy and you're quite stiff and you have a hard time, is that something that's going to take a lot of time, or is that something that's quite quick to fix?
I think it's not so much about being able to absolutely clear your scap off the bench. I think it's like finding the space, like finding a little bit of space, or like giving a little bit of space that you have, like within your own like kind of build to have that free range of the shoulders itself. So you might be like a 120 plus or like a 120 or whatever, right? And like I still think that it is still really helpful if you think about like creating space for your shoulder blades to go into, albeit you might not ever like get your scaps fully clear off the bench, but like learning how to like actually like retract and create that space is going to be, at worst it makes your bench a little bit better, and at best it actually reduces your arch and you get some kilos out of it as well. So yeah, increase the arch. So I think it's not ever a bad thing to do. I think where it might be really, really, really like misunderstood is when, say, you are already like a 2-inch like range of motion type of guy. Although that's kind of like outlawed in the IPF now, is that people continue to use that, and the only time I've seen that being a problem is when it really kind of coincides with a super internally rotated grip, and people really try to hack that range of motion. Then it gets super unstable on the shoulder, right? Because but usually I think less and less now people are going down that route because of the rule change itself.
On the topic of that rule change, as a coach, have you discovered any sort of practical implications for helping that minority of lifters who need to adjust their technique to get elbow depth?
So I think one of the things is like the degree of like internal and external rotation that you have. So the again, how I actually deal with this is look at that bottom position, go back to the bottom position, then play around with the changing of the hand pressure, right? Because those people, a lot of people that might actually have problems with depth are those people who like really hack the range with the IR grip. So immediately when they have to go through that range, the first thing that I will actually go towards is changing that hand pressure, because because if they can't get a good contact, imagine you're squatting, right? But you're only like squatting through the insides of your foot, right? Like that's not a good place to push off from. So it's a similar thing for bench press, or like at the end of the day, we didn't evolve from like monkeys, and these are actually the same, like similar structures. So I think if you're thinking about like pushing and things like that, that you can't go wrong like playing around with that, because at the end of the day, it's how you contact the implement that you're trying to push away from in the weakest position, right? So that's one of the things. Another thing as well is obviously some people might actually have to lower their arch. So the foot spacing can make a big difference. A lot of the...
What would you do? Would you change the width of the feet? Would you get them further away? What down?
So my first approach is always not to change the width. And one of the reasons why I don't like to change width is because if you think about the function of your glutes are external rotators. And not only that, they are spinal flexors. So if you were to like squeeze your glutes, your lumbar will flex under, which is in opposition to the position you want to create in a bench press, right? Which is like maximum degree of hyperextension, like all over, right? So a lot of people say, "Oh, my back's cramping." It's like, okay, maybe you're just using your glutes to squeeze, and that kind of like creates that tug of war between the extension and then like your glutes are a very powerful like the second or like the first biggest muscle in your body, it's going to extend, it's going to do all the work, it's going to pull you into a flex position. So widening your stance gives a lot of leverage to your glutes to do that. So if you need to soften the arch, some people might actually benefit from putting the feet a lot more forward. Now, there is a big issue with that, is that if you put your feet a little bit more forward, so if you were to set up like that for me, right? So this is like your normal stance.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So if you were to just sit up and get the bar out, okay, good. Yeah, go for it. Okay, put the butt down. You put the glutes up. Yeah. So one of the things is like when you're pushing now, which part of your feet are you pushing from? Whole foot. Okay, good. I actually don't want you to tripod it. I want you to actually just relax your entire feet and even push through your instep a little bit more. Like, yeah. Don't worry about like what you feel, but like just flatten the foot. Get as much ground contact as you can, right? And then like when you push, like actually kick away. Like, can you feel how? What kind of pressure do you feel on your foot?
More like my inner arch.
Okay, cool. And the rest of your foot is still pushing, right? No excessive heel or forefoot. Okay, good. Rack it back. And then just from this position, just put your foot slightly forward. Yeah. Okay, and then do the same thing. Okay, now lower it. What do you feel? Yes, right? And it makes sense because what kind of a shin angle are you creating now? Yeah, more plantar flex, right? So when you have a very kind of like step forward foot like this, you're gonna feel more heel, right? And then this is where people get really confused because they're like, I'm really trying to push through my forefoot, but I can't seem to do it. It's like, yeah, no shit, because you're in this position. How are you going to push through your forefoot, right? Like, it's like if I told you to jump from here, you need to get forward first, then you can extend, right? So it's not going to be a very good position to push through your forefoot from there. So say the further back you are, the more forefoot you get, the further forward you are, you get a little bit more heel, right? And one of the reasons why I don't really like extreme forward feet position is because when you get a lot of heel, you get a lot of hamstring, and then you get a lot of glute as a result as well. So think about it like people who do like hip thrusts, but they don't push through their forefoot much. They push through the heel, they get a lot of like the posterior chain muscles like that. Now, a solution to this is, remember we talked about like feeling the like inside arch. So if you were to do that same position, yeah, the super forward one, right? So one of the things that you will see when people use the super forward feet position, right, is that they'll slide as well, right? That's the first thing. Right. So kick really hard. Can you feel yourself sliding? Okay, so from this, it's easier to slide. Now the other thing that if you for some reason you need to do this because of like the new rules or like softening the arch and stuff, or you don't have that hip like extension, one of the things you can try is actually to turn your foot outwards. So the reason why you will, it might feel a little bit better is now when you're outwards, you can actually push through the whole foot rather than just your heels. And if your stance is still pretty narrow, like a ballet dancer, you won't get as much glutes. You only get it if like you're like here, and then now you're in like that sumo position, and you will feel that glute. So you give that a try, and then you see how that feels for you.
My apologies.
So like, yeah.
Oh yeah, I feel my whole foot a little.
And quads. Quads?
Not as much.
Yeah, but more glutes and stuff, right? Yep. Okay, cool. Rack it. So I would say that for people that are more foot forward, they will be using more of what I call an active arch. So this is more reliant on your ability to kick and push, right? Also a little bit of a higher risk because if the carpet is slightly slippery or whatever, you're gonna run that risk of slipping. But if you are someone that is a little bit more of a passive archer, so these are usually your lighter weight classes with the feet a little bit more back, then you'll see that more of like a traditional type of thing. Then you'll see that they don't really have that as much of a need to push, but they have a lot of a high mobility need, a high mobility demand to maintain that shape. And then obviously subsequently as well, if you get your feet too far back when you kick, one of the things that I know we've spoken about this is the direction of force as well. So we'll show what we mean by direction of force is that if you were to just put your feet super tucked back, and then you just like set up, it might be a bit uncomfortable for you. Yeah.
I'll do the rest.
Okay, I think you just hold the position, right? So if you were to leg drive from here, like you don't have to unright, just leg drive. So one of the things that I would like want to point out is that if you were to kick, the force would be going through like the tibia, and it's going like outwards in this direction, and the hips will also go outwards in this direction, right? Which is not the direction of kick that you want from the leg drive, right? You want it kind of back towards the bar. So if you were to kick from here, everything will rise upwards and away, right? Whereas if you're a little bit more forward, so if you go back to your old stance, right, and you kick, like the force is more upwards and then transmitting through this position. Obviously, Norman's legs are long, so not going to be super perfect, but as much as possible, one thing that I like to set up for is the knee to the top of the arch being a straight line. So you get that really nice, as you kick, the force goes like through the entire straight line of the hips, the low back, and then into the arch, and then into your press as well. So that's foot position for us. Any questions, issues?
What about breathing and bracing before descending on a barbell?
Breathing and bracing, I think that's gonna differ for some people. I typically for myself, I don't really brace, and for my lifters, I don't really like brace. I think it's a little bit overstated that you need to like brace and stuff. It's more about like, and I think it's the same for like even the lower body stuff as well. You don't need the biggest breath in the world, especially if you're already in a good position to do that. So, but we can go through a little bit of it. So if you set up for me. Okay, so for me, a large part of the bracing comes from the legs. So so make sure you're able to drive well, and then as you just before it descends, so once you get the start command, think about breathing in through a straw into your collarbones. So like a lot of people will expand here, or like they'll expand like here, but I like to expand like this bit, right near the kind of collarbones as well. So if you just relax, so and then you breathe in, and then can you feel the expansion? Okay, and then you just descend, and then press. So one thing I want you to try, if you can, is to actually use a little bit of a nasal inhale. See if that changes things a little bit, keeps everything a little bit more static for yourself. Because I do see that your inhale is still a little bit. Use your nose, man.
Gambit.
Difference?
Yeah. Less movement around the shoulders.
I think a lot of people are a little bit over reliant on like a big air, you don't really need it. If you take the time to work on the breathing stuff that we talk about, I think in the long run you'll feel that your nasal inhales get you more tense than your kind of like this kind of things, which I personally am not a big fan of. Obviously, some people, if you're very accomplished, do what you need to do, but that's how I would kind of differ in terms of.
So there's a small minority of lifters, both light and heavyweights, who wear a belt for a bench press. Some people claim that they use it for race. What are your thoughts on using both for bench press?
I think the belt for bench press, depending on the size, can be very can be both an advantage and disadvantage. So where I think it might be helpful is if you're someone that like really struggles with a lot of like low back discomfort and things like that. And where I think it can be an advantage as well is also if you're a super heavyweight, right? So if you're a super heavyweight, one of the things that you can do is, say you're on like belt pull 4, right? For your squat and your deadlift. For the bench press itself, you can actually use it to create a lot of extension and essentially push your guts upwards, right? So if you use like a belt hold like 3, like before you buckle the belt, like really like suck in everything, and then you buckle it on like a lower hold, and then like when it's filled up, it literally becomes like a structural constraint that you end up being like this hourglass type of thing, and everything's just like shoved up, and your touch point gets higher as well because the belt is literally holding like all the mass, like higher up, right? So that might be an advantage for those people. In general, I don't really coach it for that. It's because I find that it can limit people's ability to kind of extend.
Is it more weight class specific? Is it like a thing where statistically speaking, it's more beneficial for like a heavier lifter, or is it just more dependent on the individual?
I think it's more dependent on individual. I think on the higher weight classes, definitely a belt can be super helpful. But on the lower end of things, in my experience, where I've only seen it is when people do have like low back discomfort and things like that. And the other one that I find is quite helpful is as a teaching tool. So if people are not learning to like how to push, right, or how to extend, the belt can almost become like the foam roller. Right. So when you wear the belt, and you kind of like come down, you're thinking about like moving your back and your upper back like away from the belt, and as well as the direction of leg drive as well. It gives you something to kick into, because when you kick into it, and the back of the belt kind of like pinches around where the thoracic spine is meant to extend, or the upper back is meant to extend, then you're like, okay, I'm kicking in the right direction. But that's more or less like a external reference. It's like, imagine if the bench had like things to kind of like push your shoulders down into depression, then like you just kick into it, and then you're like, okay, my shoulders are depressed now. So it's the same thing for a belt. It's just an external thing to kick into, if that makes sense.
Moving on to like, so that's breathing, that's bending. What about pressing? Like, how would you normally cue lifters with regards to the ascent of the barbell?
Okay, so
does it vary?
Okay, so for the push itself, I would say if you have done everything up to this point like correctly, that's like when I go into a bench press, I don't think to myself like, if I can press this, right? Because first of all, if I think to myself that, then chances are the success rate is like lower, because psychologically you're like not confident, right? Secondly, it's also the thing where like if you don't set up well, right, and you don't descend well, right, there's no way you're gonna get like, unless it's like 60%, then sure, whatever. But like if you're at like 98%, and you have to wonder about like if I can press it, then I think that's a problem. So like if you get the setup, the descent right, it's like 95% of the lift in my.
So you don't really think too much about where you press it.
You just press it. You just press it because you win the lift on the setup and you win the lift on like the loading, right? Obviously there is a case where you do everything perfect and then you can't press it up, and like that's just like a case of like, you know, you just like not strong enough, right? There is such a thing. And you know it's not technical. So then that's the thing. But most of the time with pressing, there is still certain details that I coach, and the other the big details that I coach is that hand pressure again, right? How you're pushing through, and then the second thing is not to overpress, right? So a lot of people, they want to like go really quickly, but if they overpress, then they're in this position now, and then they have to like reset and things like that. So yeah, it's more relevant for rep work. In fact, I would say top end stuff, overpressing can actually save your lift. So what I usually cue is that if they get, and this is something that I go to competition and I cue them, it's like, if you get stuck, flatten your arch, right? So one of the reasons why that works is because if you're arched up and you get a lot of stretch in your pecs, right, and then you get stuck, one of the things that the pecs does is adduct the arm, right? And if you adduct, you can gain leverage to lock it up, right? So obviously your arms are stuck on the barbell. Like you can't do this. Like you're not gonna shorten the barbell, right? And you're gonna change your grip in the middle of the lift itself. So what you can do is like if you're stuck like here, it means that your pecs are like there's no leverage anymore, right? And your triceps is stuck. So what you can do is actually like drop it. So now you got more leverage to finish off the lift itself. So you can actually like drop your arch, and then as you drop your arch, see how this moves a little bit closer to your body. Then you might actually gain a little bit to finish the lift off. That's the other one. And usually another thing is with lockout, if you really struggle, one of the things I like to cue is like a hard inside hand pressure, because what that does is, if you think about pressing, if you're very outside of the hand and you keep the pressure there, you can't pronate the hand, right? So what you want to do is, if you pronate, it actually locks the elbows out. So if you get stuck high and you can actually think hard about like spreading the bar, or like pronating, like pushing through the insides of your hand a little bit more.
So one of the things that I sort of found in my coaching practice is, you know, when you get stuck in that sort of midway when it's forceful exhale, is that something that you would also recommend as well? Like, and if you agree with it, like what's some?
Yeah, I think you that's something that, I mean, you taught me, and I think that has a lot of utility. Definitely breathing out kind of like increases the amount of like pressure. But the thing is, for some people, it depends on coordination as well. Like if you do it so early, you just gonna lose everything. Yeah, and like I usually keep it for like top end work rather than in competition, or like if like you get stuck on heavy single or something like that, then that's what.
It shouldn't be getting stuck in training, right?
I mean, you know, sometimes people do, and it's, you know, it's not say like you shouldn't get stuck in training, but like if you do get stuck in training, at least you're practicing certain strategies that you use, because you don't want to use it like all the time, but you don't want to also go to competition and be like, I've never done this before, and then like struggle with it. So that's like execution for bench press.
Awesome. Cool. Like this content, please click like and subscribe, and see you guys on the next one.
Yeah.